right, I'm going to try to remember how to do this. It's been a long time, 4 months actually, since I recorded a podcast, and I'm back, and I'm excited to relaunch the podcast and have guests on and all that good stuff about doing what I love to do, which is talk to people about their journeys, their trauma-informed journeys, talking to experts in the field about the work they do, and so very much more. And I'm excited to be back. And, you know, I don't know if you all take self-care extremely seriously, but that's what I had to do. I had to take self-care extremely seriously and relentlessly take care of myself. So before we start, if you are listening live, welcome. I see there's many of you on here. Welcome. I'm going to put, especially if you are on listening on Facebook, I just put a link into the chat that allows Facebook to show me your name. And so I love this only because today my hope is that we can have some interactions, we can have some conversations, you can share what you're doing, I'll share what I'm doing, and just kind of a realignment of back on the podcast, right? I mean, if I went through and I looked last year, there was almost 100 content hours created on this podcast over last year. I just looked last week and we've almost hit 225,000 streams in over 50 different countries. I know I looked at where the podcast was in every country and where it landed, and you all, there's so many amazing people that listen to this podcast. And so doing all of that, it encouraged me, hey, I've got to get back on here, talking to people, connecting to people, sharing the work, sharing what's happening in the field of trauma-informed work, sharing what's happening within this network, because there's a lot and so much more. So to say I'm excited is an understatement to get back. Again, it's been 4 months. Sean Pritchard was the last person that I had on here, and he actually took us through some mindful breathing. And right after that, I actually subscribed to his daily breathing techniques and strategies and have been engaging in those as often as I possibly can. And it's been amazing. And some of these practices, what it made me realize is that I needed to slow down a little bit. I needed to take care of myself. And I went through some realization of I'm not my work, that I'm actually a living, breathing human being that sometimes just needs to pause and take a minute and reconnect and show up for my family and show up for my child who plays every sport under the sun. Just show up. And that means that I couldn't show up in every part of my life. And I tell you this as an encouragement to sometimes you have to do that too in your lived life journey, right? We commonly get caught up in this idea that we are what we do. And I went through a retreat over the summer, and there was a powerful question asked to me, and I'm going to ask it to you all and give you a moment to think about this. Without a role that you play, whether that's father, whether that's mother, whether that's spouse, whether that's educator, whether that's doctor, whatever it is, those roles that we fill, how do you describe yourself without thinking about those roles? Just simply you as an individual, as a human being. And it made me pause because I really had to start digging. You mean not as a significant other or a spouse, not as a father, not as an educator, not as a podcaster, not as a unapologetic disruptor, none of those things? Wow, I've really got to settle in and begin to think about who am I, right, as an individual. And that set me off this journey of going, I've got to pause. And I'm really excited to say that when I stopped recording this podcast, I did just that. I began to take care of myself in a variety of ways. And one of those ways is that I re-embraced my love of cycling. for those of you who know me and have known me for a long time, I used to be a competitive cyclist. I used to race mountain bikes and did 6-hour races and had an amazing community. Then I became a principal, and all of that kind of went by the wayside. Well, I've rediscovered this love for cycling and have been riding 3 to 4, even 5 days a week. I engaged in a 5-day bike packing trip across the state of Missouri. It was supposed to be with a friend. He wasn't able to complete it, so I got to spend 3 days by myself cycling through Missouri in September. It was remarkable. It was amazing. It was connection to myself and nature, bilateral stimulation, which is what happens when you pedal that in nature while just enjoying being alone, really. I got to have a lot of thought time and thinking processes around this work. And so I am excited to tell you all a little bit about what's been happening with the Trauma-Informed Educators Network, what is going to be happening with this podcast. I already have started lining up guests next week. Next Monday, I already have 2 guests that I can't wait for you to hear from and meet. But let me tell you a little bit about the network. So the Trauma-Informed Educators Network has always been a network of educators for educators by educators in support of trauma-informed work, right? And so in January of this past year, I brought on a team. We have a pretty amazing team, and we are supporting districts, schools, organizations around the country. Some of them are long-term. I can tell you, shout out to Chester County Intermediate Unit in Chester County, Pennsylvania. We're on year 2 of this amazing partnership where we are working with a leadership team and developing this long-term ground, focusing on building this from the ground up with a strong foundation all the way to immersing this district into this work. And we're in year 2, and it's been amazing, right? It's been amazing. Shout out to Odo Shortell Middle School in New York. Been working with them all year. Matter of fact, I meet with their admin team tomorrow. Shout out to Gemini Inc. in San Antonio, Texas, where they're a nonprofit organization and I don't have their books next to me, but I will grab one. They work with youth to write their experiences through poetry, and then they publish these books. I got to work with the team there of all of their volunteers who are professional writers, not necessarily educators, and help them integrate trauma-informed work into their interactions. Amazing, amazing, amazing stuff that's been happening. And we're here to support you all right? We're here to support those people on the ground doing the work and just cheerleading, right? And helping build strategy and focus around what do we do next, or where do we start, or how do we bring a team together, or what does facilitation look like when we're talking about strategic planning? All of those things are what we're doing to support. As far as the podcast, you all, I'm so excited to relaunch it. I was trudging forward so intensely on getting to that 100th episode. This is 93 episodes, you all. Hundreds of hours of professional learning at no cost. I don't make any money off of this podcast. Genuinely, I have no sponsors, no sponsorships, nothing. This is just something I enjoy to do, and it has helped influence people and help understand the depth of this work and getting professionals in here. Now, I will tell you selfishly, I get to talk to really awesome people, so I'm definitely benefiting. And the depth of their knowledge has helped me extend this work immensely. But it really is for you. It's for the listeners. It's for the people who continue to come to these live podcasts that are streamed across Facebook and LinkedIn and X, formerly known as Twitter, and YouTube. And for those of you who don't know, all of these podcasts are recorded. The video is, and it's on our Trauma-Informed Educators Network YouTube channel. You can access, you can watch, you could take clips, you can show clips of Dr. Bruce Perry to staff at schools or to your district, or send them to your school board members or whoever you want, right? Hear them from these amazing people directly. Not necessarily somebody heard them say, but listen to them say it themselves. So that's what the podcast is going to continue to be. And I've even learned that right now I know of 6 universities who use the podcast as part of their curriculum and education, both undergrad and grad. So no cost, just come and listen and join the conversation, just like Jonathan is. Jonathan, I appreciate the text before the podcast, those words of encouragement. Just being part of this, right? Being part of the conversation is so powerful to hear from and to learn from each other, because I certainly don't know it all. And I don't know of anybody that does. So if you're here and you're able to share, we appreciate it. I do want to tell you that this year, it's been amazing, you all, the partnerships and collaborations that have happened. If you do not know that in February, we are gathering at the Attachment and Trauma Network Conference. I wanted to say Houston, but I know it's not in Houston this year. It's in Dallas for an amazing conference. We are just a partner. It's not our conference, but we show up. We love it. Matter of fact, this year we are supporting the conference, and we are going to have a discount, or a discount, I guess you would call it, for anybody that attends who listens to the podcast. We're going to be selling our Disruptors Unite t-shirts, Disruptors Unite t-shirts at that event for extremely cheap for those of you who listen. And we're going to have a meetup where we can actually meet, get together, all of the people who are in our network, right? And the Trauma Informed Educator Network, whether it's a Facebook page, whether you follow us, we're going to come together and just meet each other, have a quick little chat. You can learn a little bit more about what we do. And then we're just going to meet up, right? And get to know each other, because this is connective work. The connective tissue that the Trauma Informed Educators Network has become is pretty powerful. People have met in the network and then now are actually meeting in real life, not virtually, and meeting and helping and supporting and becoming friends, which is what we ideally want. But we also have, if you're not aware, we have our own conference coming up. The Trauma Informed Educators Network Conference is back for the 5th year. If you have been to the conference, shout out to you. Shout out to you for being a part of what I refer to as the scrappy little Trauma Informed Educators Network Conference. By the way, if you're listening, attachtrauma.org/conference if you want to check out the ATN conference where we will be. So check that out. If you've been to the Trauma Informed Educators Network Conference, you know what it is. If not, I'm about to tell you what it is. It is a scrappy little gathering of like-minded disruptors who unite every single year to learn from each other, to connect to each other, and to push this work forward. By design, this is not a fancy conference. It is really about connection, networking, learning, laughing, collaborating, all of those pieces. And how we do that is we open up an RFP. It's going to open up in January. And if I have anything else to do with this, it is going to open up earlier. So stay tuned on that. We open up an RFP in January. We want people who are doing this work in their schools, in their organizations, in this space to submit that RFP. We have a committee that chooses the sessions. Those sessions are tiered: advanced, intermediate, or introductory, right? Beginner on this work. So you can jump in where you fit in, right? But here's a cool thing. Although there's going to be about 30 to 40 sessions over the course of 3 days, we also have something called home groups, right? Home groups are groups that you get together after every 2 sessions, before and after every 2 sessions, to process, to connect, to network, to get to know, right? We actually use practices like circles to bring people together, to build community, and to push this work forward. Now, this year is unlike any other year. 2 years we were in person in Nashville, Tennessee. 2 years we were virtual. This year we are gathering in Lancaster, California as a partnership with Lifelong Learning. I met an amazing administrator who I was telling him about this, and he's like, "Well, come do it in our space. We have the space. We have a school. It's a non-traditional school. We're closed this week. Come and do it here." So we're going to Lancaster, California, which is just east of LA, and we're going to be there for 3 days. Now, I'm going to tell you now, I can't announce it right now because I don't have the full permission to announce it, but that 3 days is really one half day where all participants are going to get access to something, you all, that actually costs more than the conference itself. I will tell you, I'm not going to tell you all of it, but I'm going to tell you a little bit. It's 1/3 of a certification. And that will be for everyone. That will be the half day on the 11th, and then the 12th and the 13th will be 2 full days of conferences with keynotes, with panels. And then we are also doing a documentary screening that was based right there in Lancaster at Lifelong Learning. It's an award-winning film where you're going to be able to hear from some students in the film. It's going to be pretty amazing, you all. And besides that, we're just going to go and laugh, collaborate, learn, connect, and ultimately disrupt, right? So put it on your calendars, June 11th through the 13th, 2024. The RFP will open in January. Registration right now is set to open in March. My hope is we can get that open sooner. And we want you to come gather with us. And with us, I mean everybody that is on in the Trauma Informed Educators Network, not just me, but so many other people that are going to be there. The last update that I want to tell you about, and then I'm going to welcome, if you're listening live and you have questions, you have thoughts, just throw them into the comments on this event and I will read them out. We'll have a conversation. And if not, that's okay, because I don't have to be here on an hour for a full hour. I'm just here to update you and tell you who's coming next week and what to expect moving forward. So the last thing that I'm so excited about, you all, and if you know me, you probably hear that I'm not the most academic person you've ever heard speak. I'm more of, what have I been told? Practical, down to earth, something else. I get told this pretty often when I do my keynotes and things. I have been invited to be part of a author team for a book for Harvard Education Press. And you all, we are starting chapter 3. We're knocking this thing out, and I'm so excited. I'm fired up that this resource is going to be put into the world for everyone to enjoy, learn from. My particular part as the lead author is really sharing my experiences as a principal, starting this from the ground to building it over time. And you've heard me on this podcast, if you've listened, it's real, raw, and transparent. I talk about how and what mistakes I made. I talk about stories where I was wrong and I had to apologize. Stories of what happens when things don't go the way you think they should, and how do you implement strategies when everybody isn't on board. All of those things, right, are going to be covered in this book. And what we're really focusing on in this book is not necessarily trauma per se, but focusing on stress. And I will tell you, I've been in districts, I've been in schools, I've been around the country, I've even been internationally in the last year. And it's global. This is a global issue of the impact of stress. Teachers are stressed, kids are stressed, parents are stressed, admin's stressed. Everybody's feeling this intensity of stress. And I've heard it 1,000 times, you all. And I have to say, I now respond when I hear it. And this is what I've heard so many times. And that is, well, when I was in school. Well, I'm going to tell you, unless you graduated from high school in the last 10 years, some of you have, and I welcome you especially if you're a new teacher, I want you to come on the podcast. I want to have a conversation with you. Because when I was in school, we didn't have active shooter drills, right? We didn't have fear of somebody coming into the school and firing upon us, right? We didn't have that. I didn't have social media when I was in school, right? We didn't have the stress of assessments. There's so much that's happening with, I hadn't lived through a pandemic, right? We are on unprecedented, incomprehensible times. As Jonathan mentioned, collective dysregulation. That's exactly what it is. And what I'm noticing is that schools, districts, organizations are trying to do more of what we've always done because it used to work. I will tell you, what we've always done is not going to work. It isn't working. And I see it in my own home state of Tennessee. I see it across this country, simply in pushing punishment and incarceration of youth. In the state of Tennessee, there's actually bills right now to be able to charge youth with adult crimes. There's this push for additional and harsh punishments for kids. This is happening across this country, and I will tell you, it's not working. And I have the data to show you it isn't working. And so we have to seize this opportunity where now schools and districts and organizations are starting to talk about mental health, right? That mental health is something we should be talking about. Mental health should have been talked about for decades. But it is a conversation of yes, and let me tell you about the impacts of stress. And that's exactly what this book is going to do. It's also going to lay out how can we, through a socio-ecological view, how can we change some of these paradigms, right? From systematic all the way down to that individual experience. Because we can't put all of this pressure on our educators, on our teachers, right? Jill, I agree with you in the chat. She says, I feel like the pandemic was a missed opportunity for a reset for education. You are 100% correct, which is why we're continuing to see off the charts suicidal ideation all the way down into elementary schools. It's why we're seeing our youth dying by suicide, because we're continuing to try to do what we've always done. And at the end of the day, we're in a situation we've never been in. Therefore, we have to do it differently. My hope, Joe, would have been the same, that inequities that have been in existence of our systems for so long were so exposed through COVID that I surely thought something would change. Little is changing. Matter of fact, as I've said 1,000 times, we're trying to do more of what we've always done. And we're not in that situation anymore. Another thing that I must say, I'm so proud of our kids, of our students, of our children, because our children are becoming vocal for their own needs. You know, when I was in school, when I was a kid, there was this idea that children are to be seen, not heard, don't speak unless you're spoken to. It was this mindset that children were less than. And unfortunately, that idea penetrates a lot of communities still to this day, where children are dehumanized and they shouldn't speak up for themselves. They should, quote unquote, respect adults. Now, I will tell you, and I've said this before, I tell my own child, you need to be respectful, but you don't have to respect an adult. You can self-advocate. If they're making fun of you, if they're calling you out, if they're making you uncomfortable, you could say, that makes me really uncomfortable. You can say that in a respectful way, right? There's been things said to my own child in elementary school that, to be honest, infuriates me of what was said to my child by educators. And I'm not educator hating by any means. I am one. Right? And I've said things that I had to apologize to kids for, right? But we have to get past this idea of required demand respect from every kid, no matter what. And that, if we can let go of that, things will drastically change, because our kids are being empowered. Our kids are being empowered by tools that can be good or bad, right? Our kids are being powered by being able to see what equity really should be. It's terrifying so many people because our kids are vocal. I marched behind a group of teenagers in my own state to the Capitol. I joined them. They didn't join me. I was behind them, cheering them on. They're advocating for their own safety and rights, right? If that makes us uncomfortable, that is where we have to push and pause and say, why? Why does it make us uncomfortable? You know, I was watching, it's a YouTube video, and you might have seen it, and maybe I'll show it on here one day because the audio is just as good as the visual. It was a young man sitting in a classroom. He was long blonde hair, and the teacher was being very disrespectful to him, right? And he got up and he said all the things. Kids don't want to come to your class because they're not engaged. You just sit behind your desk. And he went off all these. Then we want to learn. We're here because we want to learn. And I remember reading comments like, "Oh, that kid. Oh, that kid. Oh, that kid." And myself, I was thinking, I understand what that student was saying, right? But if we're not in a space as an adult where we can be regulated enough to be able to understand and listen to that, and take it in, and go, "Wow, what was my part in it?" Right? Instead of automatically shutting down, going to the fight, which happens so often, we miss the messages our kids are giving us. And sometimes as a parent, he'll be 13 in 24 days. Y'all, no lie, sometimes I shut down. For all of you parents out there who have preteens and teens, and if you're through your teens and you want to mentor a parent, sign me up. Because it's hard. It's hard when kids tell us truths, right? But that's where it comes to us. It's on our responsibility to show kids how to respond. It's our responsibility to stay regulated. And yes, a dysregulated student or child can dysregulate a regulated adult. It's true. But again, going back to this book is all about what can we do? What shifts can we make as individual schools, as organizations, right? Because this work is so very important. Now, the book will come out, I think, in the fall. It might even be late summer. We're cruising through it, right? Here's something else cool. I know I've got to send Jonathan an email. He's already responded, and I have a few others of you that have responded. I'm looking for educators across the country who want to have a conversation that I can use in the book. I want to share real life experiences of educators who are trying or are doing this work, right? And sometimes it's real and it's raw, and it's like, man, I'm telling you, there's a story in here of me becoming dysregulated with a student, right? So if you want to come, oh, Jody, welcome. I'm glad to see you're here. Jody, I think, volunteered too. So did, I think, Ginger volunteered. There's a lot of you on here who volunteered, right? But I want to talk to you, and I want to pull some of your experiences out so that your experiences, just like my experiences, can help this work and change this world for the better, right? So if you're interested in being part, Jill, welcome. I would love to have you. I'm thinking about just doing it on this podcast if those who are wanting to be interviewed are willing, because it's twofold. You get to talk to me. We get to put it in the book. We get to give you the credit that the credit is due because of the work that you all do every single day. And also share it with listeners. If you don't want to do a podcast, it's cool. We'll just chat on another time. But if you want to chat with me, oh, I forgot to mention, I really am also wanting people in rural America. I have began to get this really deep space in my heart for rural America. My wife grew up in rural America. I definitely did not grow up in an urban setting, but I wouldn't call it rural either. I've done a lot of work in West Virginia. I've been speaking to people all over the country. Recently, and by recently, I mean literally this last week, I've been watching the Hulu series Dope Sick. And I've got this deep yearning in my heart and my chest for rural America, because I feel like sometimes we're so polarized, we're forgetting the lack of resources. I know that I was in a part of the country where there were no mental health providers in the full county, not one county, not one mental health provider in the whole county, right? And then I found out this is not uncommon, right? We're asking educators to do this work and they don't even have resources to connect to, right? So if you're in a rural community and you want to talk about this, I would love to share your story as well. But if you want to talk, you can email me at Portell, I'll put it into the comments, at TIENetwork.org. So I'm going to say that one more time. It is Portell, that's Portell, at TIENetwork.org. I would love to chat with you. It can be 15, 20, 30 minutes. I'll tell you, we're going to be talking about what I'm asking you about is healing and regulation spaces, strategies for regulation, self-regulation, co-regulation, de-escalation. We're going to be talking about systematic approaches. Whatever you feel comfortable with, let's chat. And I'm going to share those with the author team. Which brings me up to the next topic, which is next week's podcast on the 11th. I cannot wait. I call them the Julies because they're both Julie, and they're part of the team that I'm part of. And I'm really excited that I get to bring them on as part of this podcast, because you're going to get to hear from two of the other. There's one other author, and I'm sure she'll come on as well. And she's actually been on here before. But Julie Nicholson and Julie Kurtz are going to be coming on next week, and we're just going to have a conversation. And it's probably going to be grounded in a lot of what we're writing and a lot of what we're wanting to share, because it's really important, you all. This work is really important. And I know that there's some people listening right now who have some amazing books out there, and I would encourage you to check those out. Joe Brummer is on here. He has a brand new book coming out. This is his previous book, Building a Trauma-Informed Restorative School, with the amazing Margaret Thorsburn out of Australia. They just actually have finished their second book, will be coming out soon. We have Ginger Healy, who has written an amazing book about co-regulation and co-regulation and self-regulation. I can't remember the name, Ginger. If you'll put it in the chat, I will share that. But it's a 15-minute strategies book, amazing book that's out there. You all, there's so much work happening and so much work that needs to continue to happen. And like I said before, I want you to be a part. This network, Trauma Informed Educators Network, was started in 2018 when I was still a principal, and I needed people. I needed people that I could connect to. I needed to look for people who were doing the work, trying to do the work. I just needed people. And so I started this Facebook group called the Trauma Informed Educators Network. And I remember when it hit 100 people, and then 200 people, and 500 people, and 1,000 people. I think it was 1,200 people. And I talked to a few people and said, hey, this sounds really strange, but what do you think about trying to put on a conference based off of this little group? Alex Chevron Vanette was one of them. A team from here in Nashville was part. There was several of us, and they said, let's try it. I'd never put on a conference before, and I'll tell you, I'm not afraid to fail. And so we were like, let's do it. We did it, and it was an amazing success. Nearly 200 people. Again, scrappy little conference. We really haven't changed a lot about the structure because it works, and people walk away feeling connected, having learned something, and with additional people in their network. And so that was cool. Then I started this podcast in 2019 again because I wanted to learn from people. The very first guest on this podcast was Jim Sporleader, who has become a friend of mine. Joe was on here too. I just saw Joe's name. I was reading. But Jim Sporleader came on here. He's become a friend and a mentor of mine. And he kicked it off. And since then, I've had remarkable people from Bruce Perry to man, I'm just trying to go through all the books here. Oh, Dr. Mona Delahook, who we have been deep in thought with after her tragic aneurysm that she experienced, but now she's alert and talking. So, Dr. Delahook, we hope you continue to recover. Joe Brummer's been on here. Alex Chevron Vanette's been on here. So many other people just here sharing, right? Because that's what this is about. I don't pay any guests, and I don't get paid. This is really about support. The last thing I want to tell you all about is, Eric Rosen has been on here. And I say that, I think this, I don't remember. I have his book here somewhere. I just have to find it. But in November of 2024, I don't know if all of you know, but this podcast is listened to pretty widely. We have a great listenership in Australia, and it's even hit number 10 on the podcast charts in New Zealand, which is pretty amazing. And I got to spend some time there last year, I think it was, maybe the year before. I spoke in 4 different cities across New Zealand and got to be part of a remarkable conference called the Trauma Aware School Conference in Brisbane. So the good news is, if you are in Brisbane or in Australia or in the area, myself, Joe Brummer, Eric Rosen, Dr. Lori Desautel, amongst many other people, are going to be back in Australia in November of 2024, late October 31st to November 2nd, I think, if I recall the dates. And we're going to be sharing keynotes. All of us are going to be doing different keynotes. And so if you are in the Brisbane area or able to get there, we would love to have you at the Trauma Aware Schooling Conference. It is an amazing event. It's a large event. People from all over Australia, New Zealand come and attend. Sessions are remarkable. We'll be there. My keynote, I'm going to be talking about the trauma-informed global movement, because it is a global movement. It's taken me globally. I've been to England twice. I've been to Australia. I've been to New Zealand. I've spoken virtually in Belize and Egypt and so many other places, because this is a global movement. And so if you are in that area, we would love to meet you, right? We would love to chat with you. I know last year I met an Indigenous elder that I could not get enough information from, as he just poured wisdom upon me, and I heard his stories and he talked about so much of this work and how it goes back to the historical context of so many Indigenous people, and so much to share. So if you can make it to that to the conference, we would love to have you, because meeting people is part of this work, right? Staying encouraged is part of this work. So you all, I really appreciate those of you who have joined live. I'm back. I'll be back. I'll be doing 2 podcasts a month, every other week. Next week, I was going to do the 18th, but I'm going to be out of town, so I'm going to do it on the 11th. Julie Kurtz and Julie Nicholson, 2 of my co-authors, will be here next week, and we're just gonna have a conversation around what we're doing in the work, and they are experts, especially in the field of pre-K work. They have written together, I think it's 12 books, maybe even more than that. They have a wealth of knowledge and experience. They also share this work passionately. So if you can come back next week, we would love to have you. I know that I have a guest that I tried to get on before I took my break, and we just couldn't happen. So she's going to be coming on in January. I've invited one of my Kiwi colleagues who was on the committee to rewrite the way history was taught in New Zealand schools, to include the Indigenous perspective, and it was created and rewritten with the voice of the Indigenous Maori people. She's going to come on and talk about what that was like, of being part of this committee, and how that telling truth in history is really important. And I think we have a lot to learn here about that. So a lot of guests coming up, you all. And I hope you'll continue to join us. as I've asked so many times, if you haven't given us a review, please review the podcast. Love to have the reviews. All it does is it just bumps us up and gets the listener, gets this podcast to more people. I can tell you, it was rated one of the top 10 trauma-informed podcasts in the country. And that helps because it just gets this message to more people. And what we're trying to do is expand this message as far and as wide and as deep as we possibly can. So give us a review if you're in, if you can do that. Share us, let people know about us. I don't know about you all, but I'm a podcast listener. I will tell you, I listen to The Armchair Expert, which is awesome. I also listen to Smartlist. These are some really top level podcasts that many of you probably are familiar with. I do a lot of traveling and I just put on podcasts and listen. And occasionally I listen to this and then I'm like, ooh, I don't want to listen to my own voice. I don't. Occasionally I still will because I'm like, what did they say about that? How did they phrase that? I want to remember what they said. So I will listen to it so I can listen to guests from the past. But you all, thank you so very much. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate you as listeners, some of you as friends, as colleagues, and as fellow disruptors, because we have to unite. We have to continue this work more now than ever. We are in a time where change must happen. We must see this take over our education systems. We must see this as a bipartisan approach. We must see this as a way to move our education system forward in a way that is safe, supportive, and nurturing to all, not just our students, but also our staff, right? You all, it's so glad to be back. Man, it's been a while since podcast. You know it's before and after every episode. So thank you. If you want to follow me, you can follow us on any social media platform, TIENetwork, or myself, Mathew Portell. You're more than welcome to follow me. If you follow me on Instagram, you're probably going to see my dogs, my mountain bike, and some random things. If you want to follow me on LinkedIn, you get some more professional. If you want to follow me on Facebook, it's literally just my life. You'll see a picture of my Christmas tree and a pacifier from my child when he was a baby. So welcome back. Thank you guys, and I will see you here next week. See you guys. See you next week.